Los Angeles, November 14, 1978. The smell of cigarette smoke hung thick over the soundstage at NBC's Burbank studio. Studio audience seats filled the 3,200 capacity. The Carson Show had already recorded 847 consecutive episodes without a genuine confrontation on set. That statistic was about to change. Only 6 people in that room knew what Don Rickles had prepared for the night. Don Rickles was 54 years old when he decided to mock Chuck Norris on live television. The decision came from simple confidence. Rickles had been a fixture on American late night for 16 years. He'd built a career on insult comedy, hurling jokes at everyone from Frank Sinatra to Ronald Reagan. Not one person had ever walked off. Not one person had ever stood up. The record was pristine. Rickles was not a large man, 5 feet 9 inches, 167 pounds. He moved like he owned the building. That confidence came from something specific. In 54 years, nobody had ever physically challenged him after a joke. The threat was always theoretical. The comedy always landed. The guest always sat there and took it. His record against comedic targets was 823 successful put-downs. Every single one ended in laughter. Rickles had developed a specific technique over 2 decades. He would start soft, then escalate. A joke about the guest's film, then about their looks, then personal. By the 3rd volley, the audience was laughing so hard they forgot to watch the guest's face. That was the point. Misdirect their attention. Bury the shame under noise. Rickles had researched Chuck Norris exactly once. He'd watched 10 minutes of a karate film from 1968. He saw a man hitting boards. He saw slow-motion kicks. He formed one conclusion. This was a movie actor playing a martial artist. Not the same thing. Actors took choreography seriously. They didn't fight, they performed. What Rickles had never understood was the difference between a choreographed reputation and an actual one. Chuck Norris had won the professional middleweight karate championship 6 consecutive years: 1968, 1969, 1970, 1971, 1972, 1973. He defended that title against challengers ranked in the top 5 of America's martial arts circuit. He'd never lost a match. The record was 183 competitive victories in organized tournaments. Not films, not television, real matches with referees and judges, an outcome that mattered. In 1975, Chuck retired from competition. He had nothing left to prove in organized circles. He moved into acting and stunt work, but the skill didn't retire with him. The reflex stayed, the timing stayed, the control stayed. Rickles did not know this. The Carson Show's production assistant walked Chuck Norris to the green room at 4:37 p.m. Taping would begin in 23 minutes. Johnny Carson was already in his office, reviewing cue cards. Ed McMahon was in hair and makeup. Paul Schaefer was warming up at the piano. Chuck's agent, Steve Lawson, sat across from him. Lawson had managed Chuck's career for 8 years. He knew what was coming tonight because he'd seen Rickles' name on the guest list. He'd pulled the tapes. He'd watched Rickles work a full hour on film. "Don's going to go after you," Lawson said. "He goes after everyone. Don't take it personally. It's his act." Chuck nodded. He was wearing a charcoal sport coat, open collar. His hands were relaxed on his knees. "How far does he usually go?" Chuck asked. "As far as he needs to get the laugh," Lawson said. "He won't mention karate. He'll talk about your film work. Keep your face still. That's what kills his rhythm. He needs a reaction." Chuck hadn't been inside a television studio for a live taping in 3 years. The last time was 1975, a morning show in Dallas. This was different. This was Carson's show. This was what 70 million people watched when they got home at night. A production assistant knocked on the green room door. "5 minutes, Mr. Norris." The audience applauded as Johnny Carson introduced the evening's first guest. Chuck walked across the stage from the left side, shaking Carson's hand, then taking the chair across from Johnny. The audience finished applauding. The cameras held on Carson. "Chuck, welcome back to the show," Carson began. "Good to be here, Johnny," Chuck said. "You've got a new film coming out, Missing in Action. Tell us about it." Chuck started talking about the film's premise. The audience settled into listening mode. Rickles watched from backstage. He watched the crowd's energy level. He watched Chuck's posture. He was already formulating the angle. At the 8-minute mark, Carson's segment with Chuck finished. The audience applauded. Chuck stood, shook Carson's hand again. He sat back down. "We have another guest tonight," Carson said. "When he comes out, something interesting happened backstage." The audience laughed before they even knew why. This was Carson's setup for Rickles. The implication was already in motion. Rickles had done something, said something, and now the audience was prepared to expect chaos. Rickles walked out. He was wearing a dark suit, narrow tie. He had his walk perfected, a kind of controlled swagger that said he owned the space. He shook hands with Carson, waved at the audience. He saw Chuck already seated and immediately smiled the way a predator smiles at something trapped. "Johnny," Rickles said, sitting down. "Who is this guy?" "This is Chuck Norris," Carson said. "He's been on the show. He's in the new action film, Missing in Action." Rickles looked at Chuck head on. Chuck was looking at nothing in particular, sitting still. Rickles leaned back. "Chuck Norris," Rickles repeated. "You ever heard of this guy?" I hadn't, so I looked him up. "You know what Chuck does?" The audience was already laughing. They didn't know the joke yet, but Rickles' timing was setting them up for anything. "Chuck breaks boards," Rickles said. "Walks around, breaks boards, does high kicks, acts in movies where nobody talks for 40 minutes and there's just violence. Very artistic." More laughter, bigger laughter. So I'm thinking, what is this? Is this acting? Is this karate? Is this a man who lost his actual job and decided to become a board? Rickles looked at Carson. "You know what board breaking is, right, Johnny? That's what happens when wood disappoints a man." Laughter erupted. The audience was fully locked in. Chuck's face hadn't changed. Rickles stood up and mimicked a high kick, falling back into his seat. The audience erupted again. This was Rickles in full form. This was the machinery working perfectly. "I'm telling you, this guy wakes up," Rickles continued, "and the only thing between him and his breakfast is wood. He's probably broken more boards than a lumberjack. What's the difference between you and a termite, Chuck? The termite's got a better agent." The audience howled. Carson was shaking his head, enjoying it. Rickles had full control of the room. Rickles stood up again. He did another mimicry of a karate stance, punching the air in slow motion. He sat back down, smoothing his suit jacket. "Seriously though," Rickles said, "I looked you up. You've been champion. You've done serious training. But now you're in the movies doing action scenes. You ever actually hit anything that hits back? Or is it all choreography and camera angles?" There was a specific question hidden in the joke. It was actually insulting. Chuck was still looking at nothing. What happened in the next 8 seconds would be told in training gyms across America for the next 40 years. Nobody filmed the backstage moment, but the 4 producers who witnessed it told the same version without needing to coordinate. Chuck stood up slowly. He did not stand aggressively. He stood the way someone stands when they need to use the bathroom. No anger, no threat, just standing. He looked directly at Don Rickles. "Don," Chuck said, "I appreciate the comedy. You're very good at what you do." The audience quieted. This wasn't the reaction Rickles had been banking on. Rickles leaned forward, smiling, waiting for the defensive comment. "But I want to show you something," Chuck said. Chuck reached over to the coffee table between them. On it sat a teacup and saucer, china, probably worth $40. The kind of thing that sits on late-night sets as decoration. Chuck held the teacup in his left hand. He extended his right hand open-palmed. He looked at Rickles again. "In karate, there's a technique called the ridge hand," Chuck said calmly. "It uses the ridge of the hand. The strike is delivered 1 inch from the target. The control is absolute. There's no contact, there's no injury, there's only precision." The studio was completely silent. 3,200 people had stopped breathing. Chuck executed the ridge hand strike. His hand moved through space with perfect mechanics. It stopped exactly 1 inch from the teacup handle. The cup was vibrating, just vibrating. It hadn't been touched. Chuck withdrew his hand slowly. He set the teacup back down on the saucer. It settled completely still. He looked at Rickles again. "That's what differentiates choreography from control," Chuck said. "In choreography, you make contact. In control, you decide not to." Chuck sat back down. He looked forward again at nothing. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then the audience erupted. Don Rickles was experiencing something his body had never experienced before. He was sitting on live television in front of 3,200 people and 70 million viewers at home. and he understood something that contradicted everything he'd learned about power. Power wasn't noise. Power wasn't the ability to make everyone laugh at someone else. Power was the ability to change the entire room's understanding of what was possible in exactly 3 seconds of perfect stillness. Rickles' hands were shaking slightly. He tried to smile. The smile didn't land correctly. "Well," Rickles said, "that's actually pretty impressive." His voice was different. The confidence had been replaced by something else. Respect. Actual respect. The audience could hear it. They were still applauding. Johnny Carson jumped in. "Don, I think you just got more than you bargained for." Rickles nodded. He looked at Chuck directly. There was no joke following. There was nothing else to say. Chuck looked at him. He nodded once. "There's no need to apologize," Chuck said. "The comedy is your job. Understanding martial arts isn't. That's not a criticism. That's just how specialization works." The audience applauded again, harder this time. They were applauding Chuck, but they were also applauding something larger. They were applauding a man who'd been insulted and responded by teaching something true, rather than by defending his ego. Carson brought the conversation back. He asked Chuck questions about the ridge hand. Chuck explained the principle. He talked about control. He talked about the difference between competitive fighting and performance. The conversation went on for another 9 minutes. Rickles sat there listening. He interjected once with a genuine question, not a joke, a real question about training. When the segment ended, the applause was sustained. The camera pulled back. Rickles stood up and shook Chuck's hand again. This time the handshake was different. This time it was actual. Backstage, after Chuck left the studio, a producer named Robert Mullins approached him. "That was the most significant thing I've ever seen happen on this stage," Mullins said, "and I've been here for 11 years. Chuck thanked him. He wasn't thinking about significance, he was thinking about the flight home to Dallas the next morning. He was thinking about a script he needed to read for a film coming in December. The story did exactly what Chuck had not intended. Within 2 weeks, the teacup moment had been replayed on news stations across America. Clips appeared on morning shows. Martial arts publications ran photographs with captions. The story developed a narrative all its own. Don Rickles had mocked a martial artist on live television and been schooled. Not violently, not aggressively, but completely. More significantly, the story reached people outside martial arts circles. The ridge hand demonstration wasn't mystical. It was a perfect explanation of precision. It was a perfect explanation of control. Martial arts training schools across America saw enrollment spikes for the first time in 3 years. Parents who dismissed karate as exotic now understood it as discipline. The teacup didn't move, but the entire culture around martial training did. 6 months later, Don Rickles was interviewed by a magazine journalist. The interviewer brought up the Carson show appearance. "That's the moment I understood I was punching down," Rickles said. "I was making comedy out of something I didn't understand. That's just cruelty with a laugh track." Chuck could have been angry. He could have fought back with words. Instead, he just showed me. That's teaching. That's confidence. I learned something that night I'd been missing my whole career. "What was that?" the journalist asked. "That not every battle needs to be won by whoever talks the loudest," Rickles said. "Sometimes the most powerful thing is just to let your work speak." Chuck didn't need to prove anything to me. He just did it anyway. That's discipline. The journalist asked if Rickles had remained in contact with Chuck. "No," Rickles said. "That's not what that moment was about. It wasn't about friend." The story entered dojo culture in a form that felt almost spiritual. Instructors would tell students about the teacup. They'd show clips on VHS tapes at seminars. The image became iconic. A man's hand stopping 1 inch from something fragile and not breaking it. Young martial artists understood what their teachers were teaching them before they fully grasped it philosophically. Control isn't weakness. Control isn't restraint that costs you anything. Control is the highest expression of technical mastery. By 1985, the story had spread into mainstream understanding. The teacup moment was referenced in books about martial arts history. It appeared in documentaries about Chuck Norris's career. It became the single most cited example of what separated a martial artist from a brawler. But the most important detail was something nobody captured on film. It happened after the taping ended, in the production offices. The ridge hand strike, stopped 1 inch from the target, contained everything he believed about what martial arts should be. Not violence, not aggression, not the need to win at someone else's expense. Just precision, control, the ability to stop right before damage. Years later, young instructors would use the teacup moment to explain philosophy to frustrated students. The students who were angry, who wanted to hurt people, who saw martial arts as a path to power over others. The instructors would tell the story exactly as it had been transmitted. Rickles mocking Chuck, Chuck standing calmly, the teacup vibrating, the hand withdrawing, the silence. That's strength, the instructors would say. That's what we're training you for. Not to hurt people, to know you could, and to choose not to. The story survived into the digital age. It appeared on YouTube in degraded quality, a VHS transfer of the original Carson Show broadcast. Comments appeared from people who'd been there, who remembered it live. The verification wasn't necessary. The story had already become true through repetition and understanding. By 1995, the teacup moment had become the most referenced story in Chuck Norris trivia. It appeared in more interviews, documentaries, and written profiles than any actual film or competitive victory. The moment had transcended its origin. It was no longer about two men on a television set. It was about the philosophy embedded in movement. The story that had started as a potential confrontation became instead a meditation on what real power looks like when somebody chooses not to use it. And in martial arts dojos across America, that message kept spreading. Not through mysticism or legend inflation, but through simple demonstration. A man's hand, a teacup, 1 inch of space, the deliberate choice to stop. The silence after said everything.